Today on the Fully Alive podcast, we have Dr. Kensa Gunter, who is the architect of the NBA Mind Health Program, clinical psychologist, elite performance psychologist, and possibly the dopest human on the earth. So we are incredibly spoiled to have her today. Kensa, thank you for being here.
Well, that's an incredible introduction, Scotty. Thank you so much. It is my honor and pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, awesome to have you. First question for you is, you're awesome, you're brilliant, intelligent, super smart, could have done anything in the world. I have no doubt of it. What called you into psychology?
Oh, that's a really good question. So my love for psychology really started in undergrad.
Okay.
When I took my first Psychology 101 course, I was kind of sold. I love this concept of trying to understand what makes people tick and what makes them do the things that they do. So I was really fascinated, again, from that first Psych 101 class. I thought that I was going to do forensic psychology, actually.
Is that like CSI?
Yeah, so
vibes?
think about Silence of the Lambs, Clarice. I actually wanted to be Clarice.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to be an FBI profiler. And so I got my undergraduate degree in psychology. I went and pursued a master's in forensic psychology, and I actually completed an externship at a maximum security women's prison. And I also worked at a moderate security, a medium security men's prison. And I enjoyed those experiences, which probably sounds very strange. I appreciated the opportunity to do the work. Let me say it like that. But I also realized that being at the intersection of the criminal justice system and psychology for the duration of my career would start to have a negative impact on me. And so...
Is that just because of the things that you would be exposed to?
Yes.
Okay.
Because of the things that I would be exposed to and just knowing myself and knowing how... I'm an empathic person. And so I kind of absorb the energy around me sometimes. And so knowing that, I was like, I don't know if this is good for me long term, because it will start to have an impact on my life outside of my workspace. And so it was actually through conversation with a psychiatrist at the prison that I learned about the field of sports psychology.
Okay.
And so when I finished my master's program, I shifted from forensic to sports psychology. And so my doctorate is in clinical psychology with a concentration in sport and exercise.
Okay. No, that is awesome. Was there any point on that journey, even though you were intrigued by it, it was a field you wanted to go into, where you started to have doubts, where you're like, maybe not, maybe this isn't it?
Yeah, so it was less about doubts and maybe this isn't it, but I didn't know all the pieces of the puzzle that were needed in order to get licensed. Like, I was the first person to pursue a doctorate in my family, so I didn't really have a template for what that looked like. In my mind, I was like, you go to school, you get the degree, and then you start working, right? But there was a national exam associated. There was a licensure process in the state that I had to complete. Fortunately, I was able to do all that and become licensed, but I just really was, I didn't know about the processes beyond getting the degree. And so it was kind of like, well, let's just walk this path and see what happens. But I never really had a doubt about the field, because the more I got into it, the more I thought, okay, yes, like I really do enjoy the breadth of what psychology has to offer.
Okay. If there's someone listening now who's younger, high school, early college, what advice would you give them if they want to go into the field of psychology?
Yeah, I would say definitely take psychology courses. If there's a psychology club at your college or university, join that, because there's so many different areas of subspecialty in psychology.
Right.
You can do clinical psychology. There's the field of applied psychology. You can work with different populations: kids, adults, families, couples, older individuals, sports, and business. Like, there's so many different things that you can do. So if there's somebody that's interested in psychology, I would say take the Psych 101 class, take some additional psychology courses, and just explore the different areas that exist, because there's more than you think that's available.
Okay. No, that's great advice. I love that.
Yeah.
The term mental health gets thrown around a lot, and I think it becomes pretty ubiquitous with TikTok and Instagram, and people are talking about it. So sometimes I wonder if we've lost what it actually means. So can you just tell me, what is mental health?
Yes. So I am so grateful for this question, because I agree with you. I think we use a lot of terms within our society, but we don't often have a deep understanding of what they mean. And so, simply put, mental health is a state of well-being. According to the World Health Organization, that is the definition of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health is a state of well-being in which you can achieve your goals, you can connect with others, you can work productively, you can navigate the normal stresses of life, and you can contribute to the community around you. That's really what mental health is. I think what has happened in our society is when we say mental health, we often think about mental illness, right? And so we've mixed the definitions of the two. And one of the ways I like to distinguish that is when we talk about mental health, everybody has mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody you know has mental health. They have the capacity to think through, how am I navigating stress? How am I achieving my goals? How am I contributing? Like, that's that state of well-being. We all have that. Now, is it impacted at different times by different things? Absolutely. But if we start from the premise that mental health is a state of well-being, I think that puts us on a better track.
Mm-hmm.
Mental illness also exists, right? But mental illness, it happens when there's a disruption to that well-being, right? So if we think of mental health as a state of well-being, we think of illness in the same way we think about physical illness as a moment in time when that well-being is disrupted, that can help to give us some of that distinction. Another thing that I'll say is, when we think about our mental health, people often say, like, what does that look like? And so for somebody who's like, mental health still feels vague, this is how I like to describe where you see mental health, like where your mental health shows up is in your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and your relationships. So if you ever want to check in with yourself to see how am I feeling and what's going on, ask yourself, what am I thinking? What's the quality of my thoughts? Are they positive? Are they negative? Are they focused on me? Are they focused on others? What's the quality of my thoughts? How am I feeling? Right? Can I name what I'm feeling? How am I showing up? Am I behaving in the ways that I want to? Am I showing up in spaces in ways that reflect how I want to show up? And then what's the quality of my relationships? Because usually when people come to see me, there's some disruption in one of those 4 areas. So again, mental health, state of well-being.
Yeah.
Where does it live in our lives? In our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, and our relationships. It certainly exists on a continuum, but illness is not the same thing as health.
That distinction is really helpful. And it makes me wonder, and I know you can't speak to every human being on the planet, but how, in the United States, 2026, what are you seeing as the most prevalent disruptors of mental health?
So in terms of diagnosable mental health conditions, the statistics will tell you 1 in 5 adults in any given year has a diagnosable mental health condition. And that actually has increased for children. It used to be 1 in 7. It's around 1 in 5 for children too. So the disruption is quite common amongst the population. To your question of what are some of the things that are creating most disruption, the way I like to describe that is our mental health can be impacted by the things that happen in us, to us, and around us.
Okay.
So when I say in us, I'm thinking about biology. Some of the mental health conditions that we experience are in fact biological in nature. There is some kind of disruption in our physiology that is resulting in the symptoms that show up as mental health conditions, right? And so there are biological and genetic factors that can impact our mental health. There are social factors, right? The relationships that we have, the people that we engage with, the things that may happen in our immediate community can impact our mental health. And then there's the societal factors, the things that are completely beyond our control, but that absolutely have the potential to impact how we feel, how we operate, and how we function on a day-to-day basis. The most recent kind of societal factor that I can put forth that many people I'm sure will understand and agree with is COVID-19 pandemic, right? So I don't care where you were. I don't care what you were doing. I don't care who you were impacted by COVID-19, right? Whether it was in the form of having to be quarantined and having to be physically distant from people, whether it was experiencing anxiety because you just didn't know what this was, how long it was going to last, or what was coming next. That impacted us. And so I think some of the more common things that I'm seeing in today's society, there's a lot of anxiety in the world right now. There's a lot of exhaustion, mental exhaustion in the world right now because, quite frankly, our world is quite chaotic at the moment. There's a lot that's happening around us that is unprecedented, that's unknown, that's anxiety producing, and people are trying to navigate that in addition to doing things to just take care of their day-to-day needs, right? Like prices are going up for different things that we need, whether it's food, whether it's gas, whether it's insurance. And that's stressful. And so I'm seeing a lot of anxiety, I would say, and it's related to some of the ongoing, unpredictable, chaotic state of the world around us.
What is a way to navigate for someone, and I'm someone who's, struggled with anxiety my whole life. What would you say is like a healthy approach to navigating the chaos in our world and this anxiety and uncertainty, and trying to do so in a healthy way so you can maintain your mental health and the quality of your relationships?
Yeah. So, it's challenging because if you are aware and if you're paying attention at all, you're likely feeling some anxiety or some
Right.
angst
Mm-hmm.
at a minimum in terms of the world around us. But I think one of the things that's helpful to do is try to recenter your perspective on the present moment, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time the anxiety that we feel is because we're thinking about the future, and we may be worrying about a feared future or an undesirable future, or we may be thinking about and feeling overwhelmed by what might happen or what's to come, rather than focusing on the present moment that we have and kind of taking advantage of the opportunity that we have to control the moment that we're in. And so when you ask kind of what can somebody do to manage that anxiety, the first thing I would say is try to shift your perspective back to the present moment and the world around you, right? So it's, instead of focusing so much on a future, trying to focus more on the present, and instead of focusing on the larger world context, focusing on your sphere of influence and your sphere of your day-to-day, because that's where we have, or we tend to have, more control over kind of what happens. I have more control over what happens with my life and in my day-to-day and in my circle of influence than I do in the world at large.
Right.
And so when I narrow that focus and bring it back to the present moment, that allows me to think about not what if or what might happen, but what am I doing now to create a feeling of peace, calm, to connect with the people in my life, to try to maintain my health in a way that allows me to be present and be okay in this moment. So like shifting that focus is a big thing. There are some other strategies. There are a lot of strategies that people can do. Journaling, meditating, for people who may be spiritual, prayer, really grounding yourself in something that allows you to feel centered, stable, and connected to something larger than yourself is also a way that sometimes people can manage feelings of anxiety. And I would say don't try to go it alone. Like, we were not meant to be islands.
Yeah.
Right? We are meant to connect with people. So connecting with sources of support, friends, family, whomever, whatever that looks like, but maintaining your connections, shifting your perspective, engaging maybe in activities that are grounding for you and connect you to a higher purpose and a higher power, are some of the things that you can do to try to manage that anxiety.
Oh, that's incredibly helpful. I remember, because I've worked with you personally. I can say that because it was me, obviously. Kenza would never let anyone know that. But I remember one time you told me, you just said, be where your feet are. You were the first person I ever heard say that. I mean, it might have been back in 2017, 2018 or something. And I've heard it all the time now, but that was the first time I heard it, or maybe the first time it actually, like, the synapses actually fired. And I've taken that, when you talk about like centering down, being there in the present moment, that's helped me so much. I tell my kids that all the time too. And now, they're 13, 11, and they're like, oh, you want me to be in my shoes?
Yes.
Actually, I was like, yes, actually, I do.
I want you to be right there. Yes.
I was like, you don't understand the sage wisdom that this is, because one day you're going to need that. Yeah. No, but that was actually an incredibly helpful cue for me to be like, oh, I can't control everything out there, but I can be here
right
in
now.
This moment, right now.
In this moment.
Yeah.
Right. And get my grounding and then decide how I want to move from here. Right.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I've seen this popping up more and more. Can you explain to me what a limiting belief is?
Again, I think one of those terms that gets thrown around, but what does that actually mean? Simply put, I would say a limiting belief is a thought that you have that puts restrictions or unnecessary boundaries on what you think you're capable of or what you think you can do, right? Now, there certainly are limits to what we can do. There's limits to our capacity. There's limits to our energy. But I think a limiting belief is something that's not necessarily grounded in reality. It's grounded more in a fear. or it's grounded more in a concern about your ability or capacity to do something without there being evidence to prove one way or another whether you can or not. So I think of a limiting belief as an untested belief that we hold on to as fact that puts restrictions and unnecessary boundaries on what we think we're capable of.
Why do those form?
Oh, because we're human.
Okay.
Because we're human. And a lot of the things that we do as humans are designed to protect ourselves from whatever the threat may be. Like whether the threat is real or imagined, whether it's a physical threat, whether it's an emotional threat, whether it's a threat to my identity or a threat to how I see myself. We're designed to protect ourselves from things that feel threatening. And so that limiting belief, although not grounded in truth or reality, in my mind may protect me from embarrassing myself or may protect me from doing something where, heaven forbid, I fail, as if that's a bad thing, right? It protects me from some feared negative experience that I think lives on the other side of whatever it is that I'm now stopping myself from doing.
Where would I or anyone develop the courage to test that belief and be like, all right, it might be real, but it's untested. And so the only way, what I'm hearing, I guess, is the only way to know is just to try. Yeah, exactly.
It's to try. But how do you try? Right? That becomes the question.
Exactly.
How do you develop the courage to try? Yeah. And so, our society, where we are in society, is a very interesting place because I think if I look around, it feels like we have created this expectation or this norm that everybody is supposed to know and you're supposed to be expert and you're not supposed to do anything unless you are exceptional at it at all. Like we have diminished the value of learning and developing and trying and making mistakes. And we have totally devalued the process of developing skills and the process of gaining expertise for the microwave moment of already being expert, right? Yeah. And so how do you get the courage? Like one of the things that I encourage people to think about when you have a limiting belief or you have a doubt in your mind, like I can't do that. Well, okay, what would make it possible for you to do that? Right? Instead of I can't, okay, I can do this if X, Y, Z, right? And identify the things that may create a scenario in which you could see yourself making an attempt, right? Without the expectation of perfection, without the expectation that you'll get it right, but what is it like to just make the attempt?
Yeah.
Right? And so it's exploring, if I feel like I can't, what would make the situation one that makes me think maybe I can? Or if I have this story that I'm telling myself, is there another story that might be true here? Right? Like what's another story that might actually also be true that I can tell myself that would allow me to try? And I think the last part I'll say there is the attempt, if we can disconnect the attempt from the outcome, we would try a lot more things. Right? If I define the win as just making the attempt, right? The win is not how good the attempt is, not how well I do. It's not whether I look great to everybody else who's watching. The win is just, did I make the attempt? Did I make the effort? Did I give myself the chance to see what's possible? And if I look at that as the win, as opposed to only judging the win by the outcome, we might give ourselves more permission to try.
Well, that's all for today. That was so good. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Simon Sinek. He wrote this book called The Infinite Game, and he bases it on game theory. But what I took away from that is his whole thing is like, you're not aiming for the outcomes of wins and losses. The goal is to play the game.
Yeah, play the game.
And to keep playing the game as long as possible.
Keep playing the game.
And it's like, oh yeah, just try, just attempt, just keep playing the game. So if you don't have your identity tied to an outcome, you're like, oh, I failed, I'm a failure. You're like, that's not it.
And even if you do fail, which is highly possible because that's a part of life and that's a part of learning and growing and developing, what can you learn from that attempt, right? Because to fail means you tried.
Right.
So what can you learn from that effort that you can apply in your next attempt to maybe put you closer to a success, right? But yes, it's playing the game. And I love the phrase playing the game because it brings in something that I think we also forget as we become adults and responsible and all this is play. The idea of having fun, the idea of doing something for enjoyment, the idea of thinking of the attempt, whatever it is you're trying to do, thinking about from the standpoint of, I get to try this, I get to do this, as opposed to, I don't want to risk failing at this. And look, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I certainly have my challenges and struggles with doubt and fears of failure and wanting to be perceived in a certain way as well. But what I also know is you'll never develop and learn and grow if you don't first try. You have to try.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, just one other thing I just want to touch on that is, for me, it almost sounds like you just have to like reframe failure. Because I think things that I cared about, that if I failed at those things, they were devastating. Like if I failed at the spelling bee, I didn't care. It didn't mean anything to me, right?
Right.
But I think it's like reframing in your mind, and maybe tell me if that's the right language or not, of what failure is, and like, does failure equal devastation? And it's like, if I can reframe it, like, no, failure is not devastating, it's a part of being human, it's a part of being life, and it's more information than devastation. And so like, all right, so this is that didn't work, but now I know what doesn't work, so now I can tweak and rearrange and try different things.
100%. Like, failure is the end of a sentence, it's not the end of a story. You know what I mean? Like, yes, like it may mark the end of that attempt, but then you take that information, apply it to your preparation, and use that in your next attempt. So yeah, you're right. Like, it's this idea of it's information. It doesn't have to be devastation. It doesn't have to be an ending, right? But it is. It may be an ending again to that attempt, but it doesn't have to be the end of the story. Like I said, it's the period on a sentence. It doesn't have to be the end of a chapter, the end of a book, the end of a paragraph. Like, you can also keep going beyond that point. That choice becomes yours, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think reframing is the right language to say that we need to reframe and rethink the weight that we put on failure, and we treat it like it's this negative thing. No, it doesn't feel good. Let's be clear about that, right?
Yeah,
like, no, it doesn't feel good to not achieve something you set out to accomplish, but it also doesn't mean you can't accomplish that thing. It just means now you have to think of, what else am I going to do to try to accomplish that thing? Like, what's going to be my next effort, right? It's think of any great athlete you know, or any great person that you think of as being great in whatever their field is. They didn't get there because they never made mistakes, or they never had failures, or they never had setbacks, or they never experienced challenges. They got there because they persisted through them and kept going. And that doesn't mean their feelings weren't hurt. That doesn't mean they weren't disappointed. That doesn't even mean that they didn't take a break and stop for a period of time. What it means is they didn't stop indefinitely, right?
Yeah.
They may have paused and stopped and regrouped and gone and done something else and come back and tried that thing again. What it means is that they did not allow the failure to completely stop or derail them.
No, that's great. I love that.
They kept going.
Yeah,
thank you. Keep going.
That's great. Okay. Easy one for you next here. Multi-part question.
Okay.
What is manifesting from a psychological perspective? Is it helpful? Does it work? Is it harmful in any way?
I think manifesting is simply this idea that if we believe something strong enough, first we have to believe it in order for anything to have the potential to show up in our lives, right? It's kind of like, if you can see it and you can believe it, then you can achieve it, right? I think that's the simplest way for me to describe manifesting, right? If I have a strong enough belief, that thing will appear in my life. I think that belief is an element that has to be present, right? We certainly do need to have the belief in our ability to do things, and it's helpful if we believe that goodness is possible in our life and that some of the good things we want are possible in our life. I'm a Christian person. And so the phrase that comes to mind is, but faith without works is dead.
Okay.
Right? So belief is one part, but action is the other. And so I name my Christian identity because that's where the faith without works comes from.
Yeah.
But for someone who's not religious or spiritual, the same principle applies. Beliefs without action will not necessarily result in the outcomes and the things that you want. And so I think manifesting and just holding on to this idea of manifesting becomes harmful when we don't engage in the complementary action to try to make that thing happen. And so believing, and I want people to believe in it. Please believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, why would you expect anybody else to believe in you? But also get to work.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
And engage in some actions to help bring that thing to pass.
Yeah, that's really helpful to think about it that way. I think one of the things for me that makes it where like I wrestle with it or where it could become harmful is because one of like the core pillars and principles of my life and my belief system, it comes from Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. There's a line in there that says, above all, never lie to yourself. And so the idea with manifesting, like I love the idea of like believing in yourself, like pairing that with action, like you actually got to move, you actually got to do something.
Right.
However, I think there is a part of accepting our own limits.
Sure.
Like I could manifest all I want. I'm never going to be the president of the United States. Like it's just not going to happen.
Right.
And that's probably not true for you. You legitimately could be the president of the United States.
That's not a job I think I want.
Not that you want to, but you probably could. And so that's the thing. Or like I couldn't play a quarterback in the NFL. And so I don't want to lie to myself and like go that far, but I also do want to, hey, I want to believe in like these talents, these gifts I have, and then actually act on those things.
Yeah.
And so that's my like tornado over wrestle I have with the concept.
It's this idea of being realistic.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like you can't just believe in a vacuum. Like you have to believe within a real context. A context of your life, a context of what you want, a context of what you're capable of, a context of what you're willing to do. You know what I mean? And so you're right. Like just this idea of I believe anything, right? Well, you can. That doesn't make any of it true. And so I do think there has to be a realistic element that goes along with the belief and the action. And that's what produces some of the results that we want, right? Like it's not just one or the other. It's a belief based in reality coupled with action that gives us the greatest chance to produce some of those outcomes.
Thank you. That was incredibly helpful.
Yes.
Yes.
But please believe in yourself.
Absolutely.
And engage in action.
Yes. How can someone engage their thought life in a healthy way? So someone, because I've struggled with anxiety, intrusive thoughts, ruminating, all of those things. What is a healthy approach to navigating things like that? Because even preparing to talk to you, I was like doing a little bit of research, and it's just like, I shouldn't say overwhelming, but there's a lot of people who struggle with their internal landscape in their mind of their thought life.
Yeah, we think a lot as human beings, and we feel a lot as human beings. And so, sometimes our thoughts can run wild, as it were, and it can feel like just a never-ending scroll of messages and thoughts. And one of the first things that I think is important for us to engage our thought life is to be aware of it. Like just to pause and ask yourself, what am I thinking about? What is top of mind for me? And what am I saying to myself? Because a lot of our thoughts can often manifest in the form of dialogue to ourselves, about the world around us. And so pay attention to your self-talk. Like just pause for a second and take note of, what am I thinking? What's the quality of those thoughts? Is it helpful? Is it encouraging? Is it harmful? Most of us tend to have a very well-developed internal critic.
Yeah.
We can, and that internal critic is usually directed towards us.
Yes.
Right? So we have just a well-honed capacity to criticize ourselves and to talk negatively about ourselves and to point out the things that we feel like we're not doing well or we haven't done right or we are where we're lacking and where we're missing out on things. And so, one, be aware of what your thought life is. Two, pay attention to the quality of those thoughts. And if you notice that the thoughts are in a tenor that you don't particularly care for, like if your inner critic is loud, now becomes an opportunity for you to develop your internal coach or your internal cheerleader, right? Because again, you can control your internal dialogue, and awareness is the first step to changing anything about it, right? You have to first become aware of anything before you can change it. So just developing an awareness, thinking about the quality, and then thinking about ways to shift. And there are a lot of different strategies you can do to kind of restructure your thoughts. Journaling and writing your thoughts down sometimes is really helpful. So that, because when you look at it and read it on a page, you process it differently than if it's just running around in your mind. I would say I mentioned meditation and mindfulness earlier, but those really are excellent practices to not only help us stay focused on the present moment, but to help us quiet our mind and to develop the skill of quieting our mind, because that's not just something that we do naturally.
Right.
It's a skill that we can develop. The other thing that I sometimes recommend to people is to just say, okay, let's say something's going on and your critic is running wild and very loud in your ear. Ask yourself what you would say to a friend or a loved one in a similar situation and try to offer that same kindness to yourself. Because generally, we are more kind and extend more compassion and grace towards other people than we extend to ourselves. So if we can kind of disrupt that automatic internal running dialogue and ask, okay, what would I say to my friend in a situation? And say that, and then literally say that to ourselves. Whether you're looking in the mirror saying it to yourself, whether you say it out loud to yourself, that can be a way to disrupt and disrupt the cycle and give you alternate language to use to talk to yourself, right? And then it just becomes a practice. Like, it's not a one and done. We kind of have to constantly be aware because different situations bring up different thoughts. And so, again, awareness is the first step, kind of assessing the quality, and then taking intentional actions to try to develop your internal coach or shift the tenor of your thoughts by truly using alternate language to talk to yourself.
No, that's really helpful. I think one of the things when it comes to just, I know it's a big category of like the thought life,
Yeah.
but that I learned from you, and I'd love to hear you talk about it a little bit, is can you make the distinction between personal identity and your thoughts? And the reason I asked this question is because I think a story that I had told myself, and I never really unpacked it, was that I am my thoughts.
Yes.
And that actually became like incredibly devastating until I learned, oh, there's actually, that may not be the case. It's
right?
separate.
It's separate. It's like, you are not your thoughts. You're also not your feelings.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's you have thoughts and you have feelings. And so understanding that a thought is just that. It's a thought. It's an idea that has popped up in your mind. You have the potential to examine it and investigate it and determine, is this even a true thought or not, right? And so I think it is important to understand that just because you think something, just because you feel something, doesn't mean that now you're defined by that, right? It may be important for you to try to understand, where is this coming from? Why do I have this feeling? Why am I having this thought? But there's an analogy that's often used, particularly in kind of mindfulness and meditation, where it's like, treat your thoughts like they are waves at the ocean, right? Like, they are coming and they are going. Don't try to grab onto it. Don't attach necessarily to any one of them. Just let them go like the waves. Pay attention to them, notice them, but you don't have to necessarily do anything with them. You don't have to hold on to them for dear life, right? You can just let them pass and notice, be aware, pay attention, but don't hold on such that you now are defining yourself by the different thoughts, because there's so many thoughts that may pop up in our head. I mean, in our current society, we are exposed to so much information that has the capacity to impact, influence, and shape our thoughts. And so I guess that's another thing I would say then, as I say that out loud, is be mindful of what you're consuming. Because what you consume, meaning the information that you pay attention to, whether you are reading the news or whether you're reading books or watching TV or scrolling on social media, what you consume has the potential to impact you and impact your thoughts and impact how you feel, which then will impact how you show up. So pay attention to what you're consuming. And if what you're consuming is not the healthiest diet for your cognitive and your emotional life, then think about what it would mean to take a break from those things, or think about what things you can consume more of that will have a more positive and filling effect.
No, that's super helpful. Yeah, I love that.
It's a lot. I mean, that's a part of the overwhelm. You asked earlier kind of what are some of the things that are contributing to how people are feeling and anxiety. And I think it's almost information overload, right? Like I remember a time, I'm about to date myself, but I remember a time before social media when what you were exposed to truly was kind of in your local environment, or maybe what you saw on the nightly or the evening news. Like you weren't exposed to the wealth of information that we have exposure to 24/7, 365. And now it's not only being exposed to such a large quantity of information, you don't even know if the information is accurate or not. With artificial and augmented intelligence, it's hard to even know if what I'm seeing is actually real. So I think we just have to be mindful about what we're consuming, what we're digesting, and how that might be impacting us.
Yeah, and that's been true in my own experience. Like I actually got off of Twitter probably during COVID or maybe like 21. Like I think I still have an account, but I never go on it because I realized like, oh my, the way that I'm set up, I keep the information, the toxicity, the chaos.
It's too much.
It's too much.
It's too much.
And I just like, you know what? It is just not worth it anymore. So I'm off.
So take a break, right? For yourself.
Yeah, for myself. I took a permanent break.
Yeah, that's true. And people have to do that. Like you have to think about what's best for you, right? I mean, I think there's a recent court decision that indicates that social media is addictive, right? I think there was a recent case that was settled that was one of the findings of the case, was that there is an addictive quality to it. And so again, just back to that awareness, like know thyself, pay attention to thy behaviors and thy habits, and think about, is this, whatever I'm doing, like, is it fueling me and feeding me in a positive way, or is it distracting and taking away from my health and fueling me in a way that's not healthy?
That's incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
I have a super easy alley-oop for you on this next one. How do people change?
One step at a time.
Ooh, okay, next.
No, seriously, like change is not something that happens all in one fell swoop, and change is not something that is necessarily an easy process, but it is in fact a process. Like I think change is a process, and I think change happens one moment, one step, one decision at a time. And I think there has to be a certain level of intention around it. So I think it's an intentional process, not an intentional moment, an intentional process that reflects ongoing decisions, ongoing steps to move in a certain direction.
No, that's really good. And even as you say that, I feel something kind of shifting inside of me, because I think just like it peels back a layer a little bit. I think subconsciously I've approached change as more of like a light switch. You just like flick it on. It's like, oh, the total environment is different, like in this one thing. But deeper down, I think I knew that. It's like, oh no, that's just not how this works. And nothing of lived experience would say that. So it's like, I wonder if like, oh, I was actually thinking or believing something that's not true to my lived experience and not a part of reality, right?
But I think it's a message that we get. Like you should be able to change overnight. Like you should be able to just make the shift, make the adjustment, right? Like make the pivot as if it's a singular action that then will result in this monumental change in your life. And the way I'm an analogies person. And so the way I tend to think about change is more like the seasons. Right? Like it's a process. And each season looks different. Right? But we accept that the seasons will look different. And we don't think that means there's a problem with how things have changed. It's just the season that we're in. And so understanding that change is a constant. My dad used to say all the time, change is the only constant in life. Right? And change is more of that seasonal process, right? Like every change is going to have different elements and different qualities. And there may be different weather associated with the different changes that happen, but it's all a part of the process, and everything that happens in one season is generally needed for you to be ready for the next season, whatever that looks like. And so that's how I tend to think about change, is like change happens in nature. So it's actually abnormal not to change, because change is a very natural process that happens seasonally every single year. And so if it's good enough for nature, I would imagine, it's good enough for us. But I think that for me, helps me to slow down and think about how it is an ongoing evolution as opposed to a singular moment. And the other thing I'll say about it as I continue with the seasons analogy is, and we also, when we think about seasons, we don't reject certain elements of the change. So for example, in the fall, right, leaves change color and they fall off the trees. I've never once seen a person running outside trying to tape leaves back on trees because they thought they weren't supposed to be falling. They recognize, oh, the season's changing. And in this season, leaves change color and fall off trees. I don't need to go paint the leaves green and stick them back on because this is the season that they're in. Similarly, we get to winter, there are no leaves on some trees, right? And we don't cut the trees down because we think they're dead. We recognize this in this season, this looks different. In this moment of change and transition, this looks different. And so just trying to embrace the inevitable differences that may happen as the seasons change in our lives, I also think is a part of that change process.
So that question, the way I was thinking about it is really kind of geared toward like as humans, individuals. However, what about like, so now I'm shifting gears a little bit into like context. So whether it's a relationship, a work environment, a school environment, when do you know when, or how do you know when that needs to change? Like maybe
when your location needs to change?
Yeah, your location needs to change where it could be a toxic workplace, it could be a toxic relationship, or maybe that's not the right word, but it's just like, oh, something about this environment it is run its
not
course
good for
and
you.
now it's time to walk away and leave. What would your advice be on that?
It's difficult to offer just kind of like a singular answer for that. And because context absolutely matters, right? Like if you think about the person who's in a work situation that may feel unhealthy or may feel toxic, right? Like it would be easy for me to sit here and say, well, if it feels like it's not helpful for you and if it feels like you're losing yourself by remaining in that place, then leave the job. But I also recognize that generally speaking, people are employed and need jobs because they have other responsibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And you may not be able to leave your job because you need that income or you need those benefits in order to be able to take care of yourself in other ways. Like, and leaving that job would put you in a position that creates more challenge, more stress, more strain. And so I think about that, right? Like I think about sitting here in this moment, just offering a general, well, I could say if it's a situation where it feels like you're losing yourself or it's taking more from you than you're getting from it, then leave. But again, I also recognize that's context specific.
Right. It's not that simple.
Because you can't always do that. You can't always make that move regardless of what it is that you want to do. But I will say, certainly if you are in a situation where you do feel like you are losing yourself or where you feel like it truly is taking something from you, your health is starting to suffer because of it. Your life outside of that situation, whether your life outside of that relationship or your life outside of that job or your life outside of whatever the circumstance is, starts to feel like it is now being impacted because of your location in this space. Again, back to my something I said before, be aware of it. Like, be aware of how the situations that you're in are affecting you. And explore if a change is possible, because sometimes change is possible and sometimes we can change our location. We just don't think we can because we've never really explored what that means or what that looks like, right? And so I also say try not to do that in isolation. Like my hope is that people have at least one trusted person that they can talk to in their circle that can help them navigate some of these questions, because it's really hard to explore some of these things by yourself, right?
Absolutely.
And so whether it's talking to people around you to help you think through your thoughts, whether it's going to see a professional and talking to a therapist to help you sort through some of the challenges that you're navigating and some of the change that you seek, right? Like being honest with yourself about it and trying to explore what's possible, rather than just saying, I have no options, I think is the biggest thing I would say. So from all of that I just said, if you say like, how does somebody know when it's time to leave? Generally, we have a sense of when it's time to leave, but be aware of yourself, be aware of again, when the cost starts to outweigh the benefit,
Mm-hmm.
that may be a time for you to explore what it might look like
Yeah.
to make a change. Again, it's hard because, like I said, I'm going to be very careful to not say
Absolutely.
you can and you can't do this, because that depends on your situation. But you
Yep.
can explore
Right.
what might be possible
Yeah,
to
no,
make a change.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, hey, it might be good to talk to someone,
Yeah.
find a therapist.
Yeah.
What advice would you give for someone to be like, I've never gone to therapy, I don't even know how to find one?
Yeah.
Like, what do we do?
First, I would say think of therapy as a conversation. Like, it's a
Mhm.
conversation that's focused on you, a conversation that is designed to help you navigate your life in the way that you want to, right?
Mhm.
And to move in the direction in life that you want to go. So that's the first thing I would say. I would also say understanding that therapy and therapeutic spaces are protected by confidentiality.
Yeah.
So it's not a situation where you go and you talk to the counselor about something and now they tell the world. Like, that actually is going to be protected. And so those are the first two things I would say. But how do you find someone? There are a couple of different pathways that you could use. Certainly, if you have insurance, your insurance provider may be able to give you a list of professionals that are within your insurance network that may be available, and people that you can explore, and options that you can look into. Psychology Today is a very popular website that has a directory where you can actually put in preferences, whether it's preferences in regards to the counselor, preferences in terms of location, whether you would like to speak to somebody in person or whether you're open to virtual services. And also, if there's a specific area of specialty that you want the counselor to be able to focus on and talk to you about, you can identify areas of specialty that you want to work on in your work. So you can actually filter your search based on what your areas of interest are. So Psychology Today is one that I would recommend. But there are also some for different communities, because I know, I think from a cultural perspective, people are often interested in culturally responsive care, whether that means someone who looks like me or identifies with me in some way. I think it really is important for people to have the option of exploring and searching for healthcare professionals that they feel will offer them a level of cultural responsiveness and cultural sensitivity in the care that is provided. And so Therapy for Black Girls becomes a place that I think of. There's a website called InnoPsych, INNOPSYCH, that offers a list of culturally diverse therapists that one can explore. And so those are some that come to mind, but also just a Google search. A Google search will reveal some therapists in your area as well.
Oh, I learned a lot there. That was incredibly helpful. One of the things that I've been wrestling with and kind of struggling with is, so I've been reading a lot of the, human flourishing studies that come out of the center at Harvard. And so there's these different domains and they're distinct, but they also have overlap. So I feel like one of the ones that the lines can get very blurred is this, like, in my brain, I see it as a Venn diagram between mental health, emotional health, that's kind of using the terms the same thing, and spiritual health, spiritual well-being. And where I think the lines can get blurred sometimes is I've spent time in religious communities around folks who are just like, oh, no, everything is spiritual. Like, you just need to pray more or do these spiritual practices or read these holy texts or whatever the case, and kind of dismiss the mental, internal, emotional landscape that we have and reduce it to something that maybe it wasn't actually designed to be. Or on the flip side, like, oh no, like all of your problems can just be solved with, therapy and managing stress and relationships. So I want to hear from you where those are distinct and where there is that overlap.
So when I think about holistic well-being, right, and all the different components that might go into our well-being, I think of there's the 8 dimensions of well-being. That's a very common framework for thinking about well-being. And so in those 8 dimensions, it includes the mental or emotional, right? But it also includes physical, social, spiritual, financial, intellectual, occupational, and environmental, right? And so all of those are distinct areas, but collectively, right, they make up our sense of well-being, right, according to that framework. And what that means is you can be doing fantastic or feel like you are thriving in 5 of the 8 areas, and in the other 3, you might be struggling, right? It's not an all or nothing proposition. We could be thriving and flourishing and feeling like we're doing incredibly well in one area of life or multiple areas of life, right? And I might be struggling financially, right? So my financial well-being may be off, or I may feel like life is good, but I just got a medical diagnosis. So now my physical health feels off. And so I think it is really helpful for us not to exist in a world where things are all or nothing, where it's black or white. I'm a fan of living in the gray.
Yeah.
Right? And instead of either or, it's often both and. Right? And so we want to think about, how am I flourishing in the individual areas, and collectively, how is this contributing to my overall sense of well-being? To your specific question around mental and spiritual health, it's interesting. I literally participated in a Women's Day talk, or Women's Month, a Women's Empowerment talk on Saturday that was focused on, in part, this very question, like, talking about health and mental health in the church and in spiritual spaces, which is not a place that we've often talked about mental health.
Right.
But I find that fascinating, right? Because be anxious for nothing is in the Bible, right? One of my favorite scriptures is 2 Timothy, 1st chapter, 7th verse, which says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind," right? So there are places in the Bible where the mind is quite explicitly mentioned, right? Do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so I think what's important is for us to think about the overlap, right? And to not shun one area because we're focusing on another area, but to recognize all of these areas collectively go together. And I, as a therapist, also identify as a Christian, right? And so one of the things I said in the talk this Saturday was, yes, pray, go to church, read your scriptures, read your devotional, do all of that. But also, go see a doctor.
Yeah.
Go see a therapist. You can do both and. Like, you can go to church and you can go to see your therapist. And that doesn't take away from your faith or your belief, because I feel like the work that I'm doing is work that I'm supposed to be doing, whether you call it a calling, whether you call it a divine path, whatever you want to call it. I feel like I'm supposed to be doing this work. And so if I feel like God created me and God created me to be a therapist, then I feel like that means other people who have spiritual beliefs can actually engage in this practice of counseling or therapy, whatever your belief may be, right? And so I think we really have to do a better job of thinking about how our spirituality and how spirituality is important for people, how it's a part of their value, and how instead of using that to diminish other areas of health, we think about, well, how can we talk about and use your spirituality as a way to enhance your mental health, to enhance your physical health, to enhance your social well-being, right? Again, it's not either or, but it's both and. How can we use what's important to you to facilitate health and well-being in other areas of your life? But I'm certainly a person who sees all the areas of well-being, especially mental health and spiritual health, as being connected and not separate from one another.
Well, I think it's helpful to, I mean, at least for me personally, like, that helps me feel seen, because the alternative is like, oh, if mental health isn't a thing, emotional health isn't a thing, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with my lived experience of depression and anxiety and intrusive thoughts, and finding health beyond those things if they don't exist? So it's like part of my humanity and my lived experience is cut off. It doesn't have the capacity to hold.
And what do I do with that?
What exactly?
Like,
what
am I supposed to do
what am
with
I
that?
supposed to do with
Right?
that?
And it's very interesting, right? Because we don't necessarily treat physical health the same way.
Right.
Right? If somebody has a broken bone, you don't say, well, just pray about it and it'll heal.
Right.
You encourage them to go see a doctor who can help mend that bone. Now, the challenge when it comes to emotional health is there is no scan.
Right.
There is no test that you can go to the doctor or go to the hospital and get that will reveal what's going on with the status of your heart and your soul. But that doesn't make it any less important for you to tend to.
Right.
Right? Just because there's a scan that will show us the physical condition and that may show us the tumor or may show us the blood clot or may show us the fracture in your in terms of your physical health, just because you can't see it, you know when you have a fracture in your heart, when you have a fracture in your soul, when you have something that doesn't feel quite right. And again, just because we can't see it doesn't make it less real, doesn't make it less impactful, and doesn't mean that we don't need to tend to it, right? Like, you can't necessarily see faith either. You see it through actions, and you see it through belief, and you see it through how people show up. But it's as strong as ever for people who believe. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think it's again, shifting away from the stigmatized view of what mental health is, because that's where I think some of that all comes from as well, is like just this stigmatized view of mental health and what it is. Mental illness and mental health conditions are medical conditions, right? And if we think of it that way, it's and I say that very intentionally. Mental health conditions are medical conditions. They are not an absence of willpower. They are not a lack of somebody's ability to be strong enough. They are not a sign of weakness. They are not a sign of anything other than you have a medical condition that's impacting how you function in this area of your life. So now, what do we need to do about that? What's the intervention that's needed at this moment to help you get back to your baseline of functioning, right? It's a medical condition, and we need to treat it as such. And again, not ignore it because we can't see it, or not ignore it because we don't understand it or we haven't experienced it. Right? Because that's the other thing that happens. Well, I've had things happen in my life and I don't experience. Well, that's you and your experience. And so again, there's so much room and opportunity for us to reimagine and reframe how we think about mental health. And again, as I said earlier, and thinking about mental health, not only being rooted in illness and distress and challenge, but thinking about mental health, how are we promoting well-being in our lives, but also mental illness? How are we taking care of ourselves when I don't feel like I'm quite where I want to be?
Right. That's helpful, because I think my fear is I don't want people to be dismissed, right? I think it's really easy, like what you were saying is like, oh, I haven't experienced that, I haven't gone through that, and so that's not a real thing. Like it's just easy to dismiss.
Right.
But I understand the detriment that is caused to another human being when their experience is not validated
100%, or invalidated, not even not validated.
Yeah,
when
it's invalidated. I think that causes a lot of damage to our humanity, and those are like the subtle shifts that I would love. There's a lot of change I'd like to see in our world.
Right.
However,
yes.
I think that's one of them. Is I really want people to feel seen and heard and valued.
You don't have to experience everything for it to be true and real for somebody else, right? Somebody else can have an experience that is very different from yours and very real, right? And so, and it's interesting, right? Because we know that to be true for so many other things in life, right? We don't all think that we need to experience every health condition under the sun that exists in order to empathize with people who may have received a diagnosis. Like, we don't all feel like we need to have experienced loss in a certain way in order to understand that loss is painful. We don't have to experience traumatic moments that may happen in life in order to understand that trauma is damaging and impactful. So why do I need to know, why do I get to say what depression is or isn't, or what anxiety is or isn't, or how you're feeling in this moment? Like, why do I get to be the judge of what that is? There are so many experiences that we don't have to have, and yet we still have empathy. And this is an opportunity, this space of mental health. We can do the same thing. You don't have to have a lived experience with it to offer empathy and compassion and grace to other people. And you also don't have to have experienced it to hold that other person with respect and dignity.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yes.
What would you say about, I heard someone say once, if you name it, you can tame it.
Oh.
That's given me, it's actually been very helpful for me. And I've also heard some criticism and pushback on that, is like, hey, let's not label everything. Help.
What's that distinction? What's the difference between naming and labeling?
No, because that's the thing is like, if I name it, I can tame it. Even like talking about my own thought life, when I was able to identify the waves, it's like, oh, that's an intrusive thought wave. That's going to rise to a crest and then it's going to crash on the beach and then it's going to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to be owned or controlled or have shame or
Sure.
fear around that thing because I can name it.
Yeah.
Incredibly helpful,
Yeah.
incredibly freeing for me.
Yeah.
But then hearing and seeing some of the criticism of like, oh, don't label things, like you don't have the right or the expertise or whatever. So
Right.
yeah.
So I think it's one thing to name or label something for ourselves, and it's another thing to try to name and label something globally that we think applies to everybody, right?
Okay,
like that's
that
a
makes
different,
a ton of sense.
that's a totally different ballgame. But if I think about the concept of naming and labeling, like they are very similar, right? If I had to make a distinction between the two, here's kind of where I land, right, wrong, or indifferent. Here's where I land, because I'm a fan of naming things, because what I think naming things does is it just allows you to acknowledge the reality of something. Like I think of naming as like a geolocator.
Oh, okay,
right?
yeah.
Like naming it, this is what it is. I don't necessarily have an attachment to it. I haven't associated anything with it. I'm not judging it in any capacity. I'm just stating kind of like, you are here. Here's that thing. Because that allows me to know what I'm looking at or to have a better understanding of what I'm looking at, right? And again, I think naming is simply stating the reality that exists, which I think is helpful. When I think about labeling, subtle distinction, but when I think about labeling, for me, that comes with more of a judgment, more of a description, more of an explanation, or I'm trying to categorize it and make sense of it and understand it in some kind of way that may or may not be helpful.
Yeah.
Right? So naming, geolocator. Here's where I am. This is the reality. This is what's happening. It's good for me to know that because now I can determine how I want to move. Labeling, I think, has a much more evaluative quality to it. And again, super subtle, but I think that's the big difference, right? To me, that becomes the difference, is that I don't have to categorize everything. I don't have to make an association with everything that I name. I don't have to put some evaluative component on everything that I name. And that to me is what the labeling looks like. I can name it and be like, okay, that's what it is. And then I can move. Right? Without judgment, without evaluation, without any of that. Now, sometimes it's helpful to label. Sometimes I need to categorize things and try to understand. It helps me to understand what's going on or what's happening. And we as humans like to categorize things because we like to understand. I don't think it's helpful to label every single thing that happens. Sometimes a thing is just a thing. And that's where the naming comes into play. Right? And so I think it's a subtle distinction. But if you find yourself like kind of excessively labeling things and and needing to make sense of everything, I think that can become problematic because some stuff just is, and some stuff may not have an explanation that we have access to, and we kind of have to learn how to be okay with that. Right. So I think the constant labeling can be a way of trying to manage anxiety. And can be a way of trying to manage feelings of uncertainty or difficult emotions, and rather than feeling them. And so sometimes I think we have to be careful of whether or not the things we're doing are actually serving a purpose of allowing us not to process, deal with, hold something that might feel even harder or more scary. We got to deal with the scary stuff too.
No, that's good. And it reminds me, so 2.5 years ago, I checked myself into this place called Onsite in the hills of Tennessee. And it's this experiential therapy, intensive group therapy, art, nature, all the things. And the like lead therapist in my group, she's like, this is soul surgery without anesthesia. And I was like, I don't know what that means. A week later, I knew what it meant for sure. However, one of my biggest takeaways from that experience is we get to the end of it. We had done all this difficult emotional work. You're exhausted, but also like so filled and hopeful and all these things. But one of the things that she said, and I'll never forget, is she goes, you are going to have to carry feelings of discomfort and keep moving forward and continue to do good. And I was like, huh. But it was really honest, but it felt like it had the capacity to hold the human experiences. Like, yes, you are going to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You are going to feel fear. You are going to feel those things. You need to feel those emotions and be honest about those emotions. And you can't stop, and you have to keep going forward. And I was like, whew. I tell my kids that all the time now. I'm like, hey, you're going to have to carry uncomfortable emotions and keep moving.
And here's the thing. What was not said to you was you will only carry uncomfortable emotions.
1,000%.
Right?
Yes,
because
yes,
I think that sometimes, but that's sometimes that's what we hear.
Right.
Sometimes is that if I feel something that's uncomfortable or difficult or heavy or hard, that's it. Like I'm going to be stuck there forever. And it's like, no, that's a part of the experience that is necessary and is a part of this human thing called life. But that's not the only thing you will experience. Right. And so.
And I think too, that was part of her point, was like, because she was using the analogy of a storm, and she was like, because that will pass. And then if you allow yourself and you have the courage to move through that and be honest about those feelings, you're going to feel on the other side is peace, relief, joy, and that whole like positive spectrum. But again, it's part of being human and the
being
experience.
and being able to hold those things and move through them.
Yes.
One, it gives you a greater sense of what your capacity is, and you realize that you don't have to be, you don't have to avoid things in order to navigate through them, right? Like you can actually navigate through the hard thing and come out on the other side. And it's a really powerful experience to realize that for yourself, right? Again, that doesn't mean it won't be hard.
Right.
That doesn't mean it might not be challenging, but everything won't be hard and everything won't be challenging. But what an experience to realize that you're capable of more than you thought you were capable of.
Yes.
And that you could navigate things that are hard and still be okay, right? Because just because I'm navigating something hard also doesn't mean I'm not okay. I can be okay and this can be hard at the same time, right?
Exactly.
Again, back to it's not either or.
Right.
It's both and most of the time.
Yeah.
It's a combination of the two.
Oh, incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
I have a quote for you.
Okay.
I'm going to read it. According to the CDC, suicide is now the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 24 in the United States. The suicide rate for this age group has increased by 56% over the past decade, with Black youth having the largest increase in suicide rate of 78%. So suicide has been a part of our family journey. My wife lost her cousin to suicide 5 years ago, and that'll always be part of our story and carrying the grief and navigating that. But as I was preparing for this conversation, I was reading, things on the CDC and National Institutes of Health on, suicide rates and mental health and everything. And I think what struck me and what I got alarmed with is I have a 13-year-old daughter now and an 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old son, be 10 in 6 months. And so almost all three of my kids are finding themselves in that 10 to 24.
In that range, that age range.
And I'm like, wow, like that hits.
That's stunning.
It's stunning, right? And alarming. So when you hear that, just talk to me about what do we do? And again, I understand you can't answer everything for every situation. What I'm trying to do is not feel helpless.
Yeah.
I guess have some agency in this space where I personally know the devastation of this, and I want to hopefully be a voice of help and hope for people.
So when I hear that, I think what first comes to mind is what I did, which is take a deep breath, because those numbers represent people and represent lives, right? And that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. And I think that's true in this entire conversation about mental health. And I probably should have started at the top by mentioning this, but what comes to mind is that when we talk about mental health, we're not talking about signs and symptoms. We're talking about people. and their lived experiences. And when I hear about suicide and when I hear about someone who's lost their life, death by suicide, the first thing that comes to me is pain, the amount of pain that that person must have been in that moment to feel like that was the option that was available to them, right? And so when I hear those numbers, again, like I said, I think about the people. When I hear the age ranges, I think it's so devastating to think that a 10-year-old would not want to be in this world anymore. It's devastating to think about anybody at any age not wanting to be in this world anymore. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves that those numbers exist for a reason, right? And so when we think about suicide, it is often associated with depression, right? With the condition of depression that is generally characterized by sadness, and one of the kind of primary symptoms and things that we look for is hopelessness, right? Like if there's a high rate of hopelessness, that's one of the indicators that we look to when we think about the potential for a suicide risk. But I also think about, this is where I think beyond the individual as well, right? Because I think sometimes we think about mental health and mental health conditions, and we think about them as it's an individual issue and the individual should figure out what they need in order to make their individual situation better, and then that's what's needed. What I have learned and what I have come to believe is that health lives at the intersection of the individual and the environments that they're in. Right? And so the level of pain, the level of despair, the level of hopelessness that a person may experience can in part be biological. Again, depression is one of those medical conditions we talked about, but it can also be environmental. If you are in an environment that is riddled with violence, that is not safe, if you have experienced adverse life experiences, trauma, abuse, neglect, that have taken something away from you in terms of what you feel like is possible for you in this world. If you don't have access to the basic needs that that allow us to function on a daily basis, if you don't have access to food or shelter or love or connection or healthcare, like all of those things contribute to feeling despair and to feeling hopeless. It's not just what you feel within inside you, it's the quality of life around you as well, right? So I then think about, well, what can we do about it? Because any number is a high number, right? And we also know that medical conditions happen, right? And things happen. So I think about what can we do to create more stability, more safety, more community in our environment and in our communities as one form potentially of prevention, as well as what can we do to better equip people to be aware of what they're feeling, to not only know that resources are available, but to feel like the resources are truly accessible. Right?
Yeah,
so that
absolutely.
there is not only help available, but like I know where I can go and get help. Right? I know where I can go and talk to somebody. I know where I can go and receive support. And so I think it's educating people and about kind of knowing themselves and coping strategies. It's creating resources that truly are accessible when people need them the most. Because navigating the mental health system can be a challenge. Let me just name that straight up. Like it can be difficult to navigate that system, and it can be even more difficult if you're not someone who feels equipped to advocate for yourself in that space. It can get overwhelming, right? And so making sure that resources are accessible, thinking about the environmental and the societal factors that contribute to people feeling despair and feeling overlooked and invisible and hopeless, and changing some of those factors so that there is a greater sense of safety and community where, like I am my brothers and sisters keepers, right? Like thinking about more of that connectivity. And so I think it's pay attention, right? Like, there's a common phrase that says check on your strong friends, and I'm like, no, check on everybody. Check on your people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just if you know, one, the way that we can be better advocates and better community members is to know the signs and symptoms ourselves. So like, educate yourself about mental health, about mental health symptoms, about signs and symptoms of depression, about signs and symptoms of potential suicide risk. Know the symptoms for children and for adults, because they're different, right? Don't assume that kids aren't having full experiences just because they're younger people.
Right.
Kids are having full experience, and all lifetime, 50% of all lifetime mental illness shows itself by the age of 14. Kids are having experiences, right?
Yeah.
So know the signs and symptoms. Know some of the factors that contribute to folks feeling impacted, right? And that may contribute to or detract from mental health. Know those signs and symptoms. Know those environmental factors. And then open the door for conversation.
Yeah.
Open the door to talk to people. Open the door to check in with people. Give people space to talk. Know the resources in your community. And be, if to the extent that you can, be conscious about making sure those resources are actually accessible, right? I think those are some of the things. I feel like I was rambling through most of that answer, but those are some of the things that come to mind for me, is that addressing mental health, addressing suicidality is not there's not a singular facet to address. It's a multifaceted issue that is going to take intervention on multiple levels in order for us to better address it and to try to wrap our hands around it.
You mentioned getting educated on understanding signs and symptoms, how they differ between youth and adults. Where would someone go to start that education process?
Yeah, so there are a lot of mental health organizations. I think about Mental Health America. I think about NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, that has information sheets available on their website where you can go and look them up, and it will tell you about signs and symptoms. It'll talk to you about different symptoms between children and adults for a host of different conditions, right? The American Psychiatric Association, actually on YouTube, they have what they call mental health explainer videos, and they're like 2 minutes or less. And it focuses on a range of mental health conditions, but also a range of kind of environmental situations that may impact our mental health. For example, they have a quick video about the impact of climate on mental health, but they're hosted by the American Psychiatric Association, and they're on YouTube. If you just type in American Psychiatric Association mental health explainer videos, the series will pop up. And at this point, I think there's 20 videos at least, maybe more, on different conditions or, like I said, different environmental factors that may contribute to mental health. But again, there are resources out there that you can identify and utilize. I also think about trainings. So QPR is a suicide prevention training. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. And it's designed to help folks, to equip people with language on how to talk to somebody and support somebody who they think may be experiencing suicidal ideation or be in that place of higher suicidal risk. And also mental health first aid is training that's offered as well. And they have different offerings for mental health first aid for adults, for teens, and for youth. And there are a couple of other different variations they offer of the program, community-specific variations they offer of the program. But it, too, is designed for the person who has no knowledge about mental health at all, no training, no expertise, but just wants to learn more about signs and symptoms and wants to feel better equipped to potentially intervene. And by intervene, I mean ask somebody if they're in need and try to help connect them to resources should they need them.
No, that is so helpful. And I didn't even know about those, but I am about to go give myself an education. So, no, thank you for sharing. Because I think generally speaking, a lot of people want to help. I don't even know where to start or what to do. So that just gives very like tangible action steps.
Yeah.
So I think that's incredibly helpful.
I also recognize that sometimes there's some culture, there's the intersection of culture with this too, right? I know different cultural groups may hold different beliefs and values around seeking mental health treatment as well, right? And so I think about communities of color. I think about those who are sexual and gender minorities, right? And there's a different belief system around whether or not that help is actually available for me, right? And so there are also resources, again, that integrate the cultural sensitivity, the cultural awareness, and the cultural humility into the service provision, again, for the purposes of creating a level of cultural safety so that a resource actually feels like a resource, right? So again, I think about therapy for Black girls. There's also therapy for Black men. There is I'm not going to recall the name of the group, but there's a list of resources specifically geared toward Asian Pacific Islander individuals. The Trevor Project is a website that is designed for LGBTQ populations. And so there are also resources that exist that are designed for communities where there may be an additional layer of cultural related mistrust because of how healthcare systems have not always been helpful. And so looking for those types of resources and knowing that those resources out there, I think is important as well.
No, I think it's incredibly important because I think with the idea of flourishing, it really is, there's an individual component, but so much of it is the context in 100%. Which we live, the environments, our cultures, our communities. And I truly want to live in a space where people are not discarded.
Yeah.
So however anyone identifies like, yes, there is help for you. Yeah. You are not alone. 100%. Is what I want people to know.
Yes. And it might take a little bit more research to identify where that help is, but it is out there and it is available because it is important, right? Yes. Understanding someone's identity, understanding what their values, understanding their belief system, understanding how their cultural, their individual cultural landscape shapes what they believe about health and healing and well-being and wholeness. And so you have to know that. If you don't know that, like you're missing the individual in front of you. Yes. And so I think having that cultural element embedded in the healthcare service that a person is receiving, vitally important. I mean, it helps to address the health disparities. Yes. It also helps to address the cultural mistrust that is a very real thing based on very real historical experiences. Correct. And so we just have to be honest about that and trying to make sure that, again, a resource is actually a resource for whomever may be seeking to utilize that resource.
Oh, that is great. Thank you for sharing and just for all the detail and specifics on that. Yeah. I think that matters so much. My last question for you today is for someone who's like, okay, you said change can happen, but it's a process. It happens, over time. For someone who just wants to make a positive change in their mental or emotional health, what is something practical that they could do starting today?
Oh, that's such a good question because there's so many simple things that a person could do, right? I guess I would say, before I list what they might be able to do, I would say start small.
Okay.
Like just pick one thing, one seemingly small action that a person can take and try to be consistent with that action because that is the key. The key to developing a different habit that allows you to focus on your mental, emotional, cognitive health differently is by choosing one thing that you will consistently do. That is the key, whatever that thing is. So what could that thing possibly be? That thing could be exercise. Sounds random and weird. Exercise is very powerful for your mental health, right? So it could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of some kind of exercise, walking, running, yoga, whatever you want to do. But it could be a habit of doing something to engage yourself physically, which can have effects for your mental health. It can be a gratitude practice. When you wake up in the morning, identify one thing you're grateful for. Or when you go to bed at night, identify one thing that you're grateful for. Identifying things that we are grateful for helps to remind us, regardless of what is going on, there's always something that I can identify that I'm grateful for. For bonus points, the idea would be trying to identify something different every day.
Okay.
If you have the same thing 3 days in a row, fine. Just keep engaging in the practice, right? The gratitude practice of identifying something. Another thing that I would say, and I've said this already as well, but I'm going to say mindfulness meditation. Let me bring it back though. Just a breathing exercise. Like, set a timer for 2 minutes and just practice sitting still in a comfortable place for 2 minutes with no distractions. Like, turn off the TV, silence your phone except for the timer if that's where you have your timer located, but just practice being still. We do not give ourselves permission to be still. We are so active and busy and moving, but we are human beings, not human doings. And so just practicing what it is to be still and recognize it can be a powerful thing. And you can start with just 2 minutes a day. So exercise, practice of gratitude, kind of a stillness activity, right? I think is something you could do. 2 more things. If you are a person who finds yourself on social media a lot and you lose time because of the endless scroll, practice decreasing your engagement with social media by like just 30 minutes. Just take that 30 minutes and put it somewhere else, whether it's engaging with the people around you, whether it's reading something, whether it's sitting still and doing nothing, whether it's going outside and just being in the elements. Like, try to take 30 minutes off of your current social media time and put it towards a different activity. The last thing I'll say is, 2 more things. One is there's an app called How We Feel.
Okay.
If you want to develop and expand your language for feeling words and your understanding and awareness around what you're feeling at any given point in time, I would say download the How We Feel app and use it.
Okay.
It is a free app. It is probably one of the most comprehensive tools that I've ever seen as it relates to expanding our knowledge about feelings and giving us the capacity to kind of track our feelings.
That is great.
Throughout the course of a day. And then the last thing I would say is just be kinder to yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we are all trying to do the best we can with what we've got. And all of us want certain things, right? And all of us probably get some of the things we want, and there are probably some things that are still on our we desire them list, right? But kindness towards yourself goes a very long way. Just be compassionate towards yourself in this process of life. There will be ups, there will be downs, there will be lefts, there will be rights. The goal is just continue showing up. Just keep showing up. Keep showing up. Keep being you. And be kind to yourself.
Wow, that's great. Thank you, Dr. Kensa, for sharing your advice, your experience, your stories with us. It means more than you know, but I also do want to take a quick moment just to say thank you personally and just recognize and honor you, because, I mean, quite honestly, I don't know if I would be on this planet if it weren't for you. So anything, sorry.
No.
So anything good that you might hear on this podcast or from my family or life, you can thank Dr. Kensa for that. So thank you.
You're amazing. It is my honor to be sitting here with you. Thank you.
Absolutely.